Chairman, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, so I am here to talk about LA Creates, which is a report that we co-launched with the Otis report last week, and I really am grateful to Sammy and Robert for including me on that. You know, before the event last week, Craig Watson and I were laughing about, him being the last speaker, keeping everybody from the cocktail reception. And, at the time I thought that was pretty funny. I see that he's taken his revenge on me today, so I will do my best to move through this really quickly and get the information out to you. I am the director of the Western Region of the Actors Fund. We're a national nonprofit that helps anybody in the performing arts or entertainment, not just actors, who are in any kind of need or crisis or transition. So we help people meet the crisis when they're sick or unemployed or disabled, and we help prevent the crisis through a number of services, including we teach better financial management, we help people find better sideline careers so they can keep on a more sustainable financial path. We help people, we're one of the Art Place grantees trying to bring more affordable housing to the community in downtown LA, and we help people with health insurance. So we are actually the only arts and entertainment grantee of covered California, helping get the word out to people with health insurance, trying to connect with health insurance. But I'm actually here because of a fellowship that I got through the Durfee Foundation in Los Angeles. They are a private foundation that selects 6 people every 2 years, leaders in government nonprofit sector, to take 3 months off of their positions over a 2-year period and study some intractable problem facing Los Angeles. And so through my work with Sammy over the years, I was very inspired by the notion that we have this tremendous creative asset in LA, in the state of California, but in LA at least, we haven't up until now had any kind of coherent regional policy for what we should do about that asset. So that was my study. And I'm quick to say, maybe, let's see, there we go. Oh, is that right? Yeah, okay. So I'm quick to say that the difference between my study and Otis is mine was not an empirical, data-driven study. It was a series of interviews, and I'm not sure.
I just saw the lasers pointing up there now. So.
Oh. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. So in order to do this, I conducted about 140 or 50 interviews over the 2 years, 80 with thought leaders in Los Angeles, 48 with policymakers elsewhere in the U.S., Europe, and South America, and with a national consulting firm, Mount Auburn Associates, that's done comprehensive creative industry plans around the country. And I think the relevance here at this level of government is that many of the people that I interviewed in all of these places were doing policymaking at municipal, regional, state, and national levels. So I think that the bottom line recommendations are things that will apply to what you're doing as well. So I started my work really with the simple proposition that LA is the creative capital of the U.S., and I think the state of California follows that same mantra. And we have a lot of evidence that we saw today. I won't go over it. One study that people might want to look at, LA, America's Artist Supercity by Ann Markuson, really shows that LA is home to more artists than any other community in the country. And we went all over the Otis report today, so I won't repeat that information. I think the importance of that is really the size of this tremendous economic asset and its diversity. It's not just film and television, it's not just Hollywood, it's not just LA, it's all over the state, and it's a very diverse sector. But the problem is that we, of course, face many challenges, and there are many more than this. There we go. But these were some of the biggest ones that were mentioned in the interviews. International competition for jobs, changing technology in all fields that every creative professional has to keep up with, runaway production in film and television, and intellectual property piracy. And certainly the latter two of those were things that came up in almost every conversation. They're very large topics for anybody in these industries, but there wasn't necessarily a lot of consensus on those two things. And for the last one, for the IP issues, certainly LA, the state of California, can and must participate in those conversations, but that's not ultimately where the decisions are going to be made about how this gets implemented. So I really had to focus my recommendations on things that had broad enough implications that they would be able to pull together this wildly diverse coalition of creative industry people that we just saw on the other slide, and things that we could actually control on a municipal level. I think with the runaway production, that's certainly an issue that's of interest at the state level, and there are people on these panels that have more information on that than I do. But I guess the two things that I would sort of lend to that discussion is, in all of my discussions, it seems that there's sort of a false moralism around this whole conversation, that this is only about giving money away to billionaire film producers, and I think at the Actors Fund we certainly see every day people coming into our office who used to have full-time lives built around hour-long television dramas and feature films, who are no longer able to support themselves, who are losing their homes because those jobs are simply gone. And so I think that we don't want to lose the actual middle-class worker who's really the backbone of those industries, who are benefiting from whatever the policy decisions end up being. And I think the other piece that was clear to me the minute I started these conversations is the piece about international competition and national competition. Whether we look at ourselves as a competitor, not just a state or a city or a county government, but as a competitor in an international market, the rest of the world looks at it. The rest of the world wants these jobs. The rest of the country is coming after these jobs. And I think if we don't start looking at ourselves as a competitor who needs to be competitive to keep these industries, we're going to lose more of them than we've already lost. So that's my little my little non-expert opinion on those issues. I will say that having grown up in Ohio, I certainly, in between Cleveland and Toledo, I certainly have a sensitivity for the wreckage that's left over even 40 years after that process happened to steel, auto, glass, and rubber industries. So I go back 2 or 3 times a year and see the results of that. So I hope we don't repeat that here. So we have this tremendous asset. We have all kinds of challenges facing us. What can we do? What can we do about it at the municipal and county level? So the first thing, the most broadly supported concept that came up, maybe not in every conversation, but probably over 90% of my conversations, was that if you really want to support these creative industries, we got to get money directly to the creative people who are starting these businesses. And I think there were some interesting presentations that sort of piggybacked off of this, with the districts, with the arts facilities right in the middle of neighborhoods that need more business development. Most people were talking about incubator services, whether an actual facility or some sort of funding for training. There was certainly a very common discussion around people who have that creative side of the brain, which you and I got left out of the line for, and the business side of the brain that don't necessarily always work together. And so what a lot of people are doing are including mentorship and education so that creative people can find a way to sustain a business. And one of the examples that I visited that didn't have the photos last week was in Buenos Aires, where they've created 4 creative industry districts in the poorest neighborhoods in the city. So it's also very focused on a lot of our common goals of reaching out to a more diverse group of Californians to participate in these industries. It's anchored by a main facility. This is the design facility. They have a tech one, and they're also focused on performing arts. So they have a central facility where they bring in 40 people to participate in the incubation services every year. And then if they locate the business in that neighborhood, once they've finished the program, they get tax credits for up to 20 years for their business. And then they also educate 3,000 neighborhood residents per year in some of the skills that the existing industries need for their workforce. So they train people on life skills, on behavior in the workplace, on, for the furniture design industry, they teach them basic construction and woodworking and metalworking. They teach fashion, people in the fashion district, basic sewing skills, but they have agreements with those organizations, with those industries, so they try and feed employees right in. Second area of recommendation, a little less unanimity around. Some people don't necessarily see the value or didn't express the value in a campaign to brand the region as a creative capital. I personally came to find it much more compelling as I went through the interviews. I think there is definitely an irony in the sense that the storytelling capital of the world can't tell its own story, and I think maybe we feel that way at the state. I don't know. That's up to you guys, but I think there's definitely a need to look at that. And so I suppose if you've lived in LA, you understand immediately why that's hard to do, because it has to be a collaborative, coordinated effort. And over 350 square miles, it's not the easy thing to do. So I ask people, well, what's gotten in our way? And I'm not a marketing expert either, but I just am sharing what people said about it. So, all of the cities that I talked to were talking about labeling themselves creative this, creative that, creative Boston. But what people said is, that's boring because it's passive. And what you don't want to label it. You want to create a challenge. You want to create a vision for the future. And so it should really be a verb, not a noun. Very simple, right? But so if we take that creative label and we try to activate it, it became, for me, LA Creates. And hopefully looks toward the future and looks toward what we are participating in. The big hang-up, though, was people sensed that branding efforts had not been broadly inclusive, and they need to be. And so if you're creating a brand or a label, you have to open the doors for other industries to participate and other municipalities, in LA's case, to participate. So with this, the designer came up with this wraparound. So you could say Hollywood creates LA, Pasadena creates LA, Long Beach creates LA. Everybody has a responsibility to participate in creating LA. And the same with all the industries. Fashion creates LA, TV and film creates LA, auto design creates LA, the port creates LA. Everybody has responsibility and can participate. And finally, it was about making it a call to action. That if we really are sending out the message, we should be asking people to do something. And, I love New York. Not a lot of people remember that was really a call to stop throwing garbage on the streets and clean up their city and take pride in it. And so we came up with what are you going to create in LA? I think it's the branding issue to me is very compelling because I think it's hard for a very diverse, different city to move forward in a unified way if leadership isn't articulating what the message and the goal and the hopes and aspirations should be. The third programmatic recommendation was all about workforce development. A lot of concern about education, and this really feeds into what we just got done talking about. A lot of support, some concern around arts education in public schools versus nonprofits, some difference of opinion, but everybody was talking about if we're going to provide arts education, we should also be connecting that to careers in creative fields and using that creativity in whatever field they go into. So that was really wonderful to hear that all that's going on. The second level is bringing more entrepreneurial training into graduate and undergraduate arts trainings to again help creative people build business skills so that they can survive financially and not leave their craft at age 40 because they can't sustain themselves anymore. And finally is retraining money, retraining programs so that the existing creative workforce can meet all of those technological changes that are coming down the pike. Finally, I think whether we're talking about statewide or regionally, we're not going to make progress if we don't build effective coalitions and start playing well together and coming together in unison so that we can support legislatures and mayors and governors in their efforts to do this. And finally, I am a social worker. The mental health professional in me could not help but go toward the can't we all get along a little bit. This is the silo busting. This is, I think, if we're going to come together around an economic development goal involving the creative industries, that we have to build a set of basic assumptions that are more important than our own turf and our own interests. So that is
Great.
that's the report.
Thank you so much.